Hello and welcome to On the Ball, the Norwich City podcast equivalent of Tom Hanks in Castaway. Yes, that's a reference to the fact that we've not been on for a while. So yes, it has been a while since we've last been on, but what have we really missed? What have we missed really? Well, apart from 5 wins, 4 signings, progression to the third round of the Cup, an £11 million deadline day sale, a Player of the Month award, our star striker scoring into an open goal, then getting a long-term injury in the process, the captain signing a new 3-year deal, a new child to the tune of Salt and Pepper's Push It, and the rebirth of Dimi Yanulis. What have we missed apart from that? We'll aim to cover about 40% of that, plus answer your questions and look ahead to Wednesday night's Premier League warm-up fixture. I'm Steve Sanders, AKA at NCFCnumbers, and if that feels like we're scrimping on quality to deliver quantity, then wait till you hear who's on our panel. That was meant to be complimentary, but it's really not come out that way. Well, judge for yourselves if you think this is a good lineup, but I'm pretty sure you'll be happy with it. First up, a man who is thankfully still keeping tabs on what I'm calling the Dan Brigham Player of the Season award. It's Dan Brigham. Dan.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Very good. Yeah, just obviously feeling a bit cheeky because the head teacher's away and we've got a supply teacher presenting today.
Yeah, the head teacher's sort of on long-term leave. I mean, there's nothing sinister, by the way, as it's fine.
If anyone has heard or seen from Michael Bailey, though, then do please get in touch.
Yes, yeah, we'd love to know. We've started putting posters up on telegraph poles and that sort of thing with his face on it. And you might be able to hear who our second guest is. I'm delighted to say that we also have Zoe Morgan with us. Zoe, how are you doing?
I am good. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for asking. It's an absolute pleasure to be on, as always. And it's my first one of the season. So it feels like a whole new world.
It feels like we did a lot at the back end of last season when we were literally just saying the same thing every single week. So it's nice to have something different to talk about, if nothing else. I mean, a time before Ashley Barnes, a time before Shane Duffy.
What does it say about Michael Bailey that his commitment to content is stronger when Norwich are losing than when they're winning?
Perhaps its correlation is causation, as they say. So maybe the whole thing is intertwined. Anyway, we won't shoehorn Michael into every single link, although this does also refer to them. Yes, if you're wondering where he is away in Oxford this Monday night, which could mean a 5,000 word piece on the Athletic about Yannick Wildschut coming your way soon. We'll have to wait and see. Yes, but do please leave us your comments as we go. We'll still be keeping an eye on them. We'll try and cover as much as we can in the time that we have. So I don't know, the Yannick Wildschut piece might be our headline act, it might not. You'll find out after this jingle. Okay, spoiler alert, it's not Yannick. And as I've already said, quite a bit to cover. So, seven matches since we last did a podcast. So let's start with that Carabao Cup first round win at Loftus Road. Let's cast our minds back. No, obviously, I genuinely can't actually remember what the score was. Conscious that the game against Stoke wasn't a cracker, although also conscious of the fact that we haven't done a podcast after a win since the 4th of March. Just did a little check on that. But wanted to talk a bit more generally about our approach on the pitch and what's happened over the last few games. I think it's fair to say it's been a marked change since compared to the end of last season, as we've already alluded to. Dan, I will come to you first. Are you encouraged? And what in particular in terms of differences? There's been a few. Have you noticed? That's my first question.
What was the win on March the 4th again? I can't.
That was Millwall away
at
a time when we thought, maybe playoffs were the hope. We have since beaten Millwall in an actual game this season, so that shows how long ago it was.
Yeah, I guess looking back at the Millwall game from last season, and when we were all quite positive, we'd beaten a team in the top 6 and we'd leapfrogged them into the top 6, and then it obviously all went to a swear word after that. But it feels like that sort of performance levels we put in against Millwall that day, and the performance levels sort of relatively early in Wagner's tenure last season are now being sort of played out in pretty much every game so far this season, which points to Wagner having more time on the training pitch in pre-season to work with them and getting the players in. I guess the key difference is he's got the fullbacks in that he wants, and they're so integral to how he plays and how he sets up. And also he's got the wide personnel in who are integral to how he plays as well, which he had sort of fleetingly last season, but not to the same extent as he's got this season. And he's also got the best player in the championship as well in Gabriel Sara in the centre of the park. So even when he plays not particularly well, like against Rotherham, he's still sort of standing out head and shoulders above most players on the pitch, certainly in the centre of the park. We'll come on to talk about it, but interesting to see how he goes against Leicester, against their midfield. So I think Wagner's sort of armed with really good personnel now, people who fit his system, and people who buy into the way he wants to play. I was sort of interested that, and I noted this down, the way he talks about Gibson earlier, saying he looked like a defender who plays football and not a footballer who plays as a defender, which some Norwich fans might suggest he's looked like neither of those since he's been here. I'm not one of those fans, but it's interesting that he's essentially just trying to get players to do their job properly, and then anything on top of doing that job properly is a bonus.
Absolutely. And I'm conscious that, it has been an improvement. We probably ought to read the room in terms of recent performances and maybe admit that the last two have arguably been the worst of the season so far. I can't actually really recall if we'd had any bad ones before then, but I don't think we had. So I suppose, Zoe, do you think where we are at the moment is it realistic to suggest that we could be there at the end? I mean, I'm asking this question literally 6 games into the season.
Oh, absolutely. And why not just declare now that we're already up, basically?
Yeah, I mean, you did say we'd finish first.
I did. And who is looking like the idiot now after all of these negative predictions at the start of the season? But yeah, I mean, it feels different, doesn't it, to last year? And that's for all number of reasons, really, you know, whether it's even just the fans' perception of who our manager is and the relationship between the two. But we probably started off probably not quite as well, but, you know, our first portion of the season last season, we were doing pretty well and winning games, but there was still a big air of negativity around of what that felt like, what those wins felt like. They never came in particularly exciting games. It never often felt like if we had to fight for something, we were ever coming out on top. And now already this season, you know, we've had a last minute winner. We've had, you know, some pretty hard fought games where it feels like actually we're competing now in a way that we weren't during last season. We understand what it is for that team to fight together and for each other, and to feel like they are bothered to do that as well. I think that, you know, it's very easy to sort of slag off professional football and about whether they're trying or whatever, but that sort of, you know, drop off in performance does give the air that you don't necessarily want it as much as you should want it, and that's what the fans want to see. It looks like a team that enjoy each other's company and understand what they're doing for each other, which feels really nice. And everything does just feel a little bit more relaxed than it did this time last season, but throughout most of last season. It doesn't feel as tetchy. Everything is just a little bit happier, and it's just nice to watch a team that seem to be more relaxed, because it makes the fans more relaxed, and then everyone can kind of enjoy it all at the same time. So whether, you know, it's all going to be plain sailing, it's like yet to see that. Obviously, it's a long way to go, but the signs probably are more encouraging at this stage this season than they were this stage last season, when everyone was struggling to describe how we played. Everyone was wondering what our game plan was. I think it is very clear what we are trying to do now. And sometimes that's not going to work. And sometimes it will really come off, and it'll be interesting to see how they kind of build on this good start and hopefully get better and better as the season goes on.
Yeah, and not only is it nice to, you know, be in the ground and watch them, it's also nice to talk about on a Monday evening. You know, I mean, I don't want to make it all about us, but you know, that's good as well. I mean, and I completely agree with the point about kind of the ability to dig in and pull out points that, Saturday, I got the impression that was a game that we would have probably drawn or lost last season. I know we had that run at the start of last season where we kind of didn't play particularly well and got points. So this one felt slightly different. And I think there will be games this season where we don't play massively well. We score a slightly scrappy goal, maybe from a set piece or something, and end up kind of getting through purely on grit and determination. And I think the squad is probably not the best squad of players we've ever had, but I think the attitude and, as you've said, kind of the commitment is going to carry us over the line a few times this season. That's what felt like happened on Saturday. Go on, Dan.
Well, I was going to say, it felt like that in our 4-0 win at Huddersfield, which all three of us were at that game. And because last season, so the previous away game to that I'd been to was the 1-1 draw at Huddersfield last season. And it felt miles apart, obviously. But I think last season we probably would have drawn this game as well this time, the one we won 4-0, because we struggled to start with. They'd gone man-to-man in midfield, which is really rare these days, even for Warnock. But we found a way we stayed calm, found a way to solve that problem and ran away with a 4-0 win. Last season, it was very rare we saw any problem solving on the pitch, which felt like there was no problem solving going on the training ground as well. So I think they're probably managing games a little bit better in terms of within those games, working out how to overcome problems. Although I would say in the last two games, I guess it's the first time at Rotherham and then in the second half against Stoke, they sort of the first time the teams really pressed us really, really high. We've had teams go man-to-man. We've had teams trying to dominate the ball. We've had teams just sit back. And we've managed really well against that. But the jury's still out a little bit on what happens when teams press us really, really high.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see if Leicester do that on Wednesday. The Huddersfield game is a good one to bring up because I think that was also that's one of the key moments we've had this season. I think we were all absolutely overjoyed at the kind of goal that we never score, which is a player charging down a goal kick and it's somehow rebounding into the net. But of course, we couldn't even have that, could we? We couldn't even have that as a nice thing because that was the end of Josh Sargent probably in 2023 in a Norwich City shirt by all prognoses. Zoe, how much is that kind of, there's been a lot spoken about it, and obviously they've made the signing of Weizhou Huang or Huang Weizhou. I'm not sure which is the best way around to say it. So it's him or either, I guess, alongside Barnes right now. Is that going to be enough to carry us through to January, do you think?
It's a tough one. I think it says a lot about how we started the season that we're so worried about Sargent not being there, I think, and again comparing it to last season, we were in that sort of slightly confusing pickle about whether you play him, Pukki, or a combination of both. He had started the season looking, really good, and he will be a big miss. And I think that's only right that your first choice striker is a miss if they're out for that period of time. I think it would be a really interesting sort of spell for Adam Eder. I don't know. I know he played for Ireland both games in the international break. I mean, how many is the most games that he started in a row, basically, of consecutive matches?
Steve's just checking that right now.
Yeah. I presume you've got that just in your eyes, just sort of going past your eyeballs.
I mean, if I just said 5 now, would you argue with it? If
I'd say that's probably five max, surely.
Cool. Okay. I think it's probably a lot less than that.
So we're probably reaching a sort of crucial time here in Adam Eder's career where presumably while Juan gets up to speed and gets to know everybody, he is going to be starting a series of matches in a row. Is his fitness gonna hold up to that? We know he's got pretty ropey knees among other things, but and B, is that spell in the team actually going to be just what he needs? It's so difficult to have been him for the last few years, coming on 80th minute in probably a game we've already lost, being like, oh well, try and score, but if you can't, try and cheer people up. It's a bit of a tough ask in 10 minutes. And he looks like he should be a really good footballer, and I think we are yet to see, apart from sparks of that, real sort of concerted proof that he is, and I think this is a great opportunity for him to try and grab. Really hope he stays fit. And I it will be different. It will be different to what it would be with Sargent. So everybody else has to adjust as well. But you've got that experience in there with Barnes now, who's they're absolutely vital in terms of the years that he has spent playing the game. I think will really help us adjust more quickly, hopefully. So yeah, fingers crossed it works out well for Ida, because he deserves a shot at it, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how it progresses.
Do we want to quickly play, Dan, before you come in, how many games has Adam Ida started in a row for Norwich City previously?
4.
3.
To go 4.
I'm going 3.
It's actually 7.
Oh.
I might have to double check that. I find it hard to believe myself. Apparently did it last season, according to the Motherlode.
I imagine he was bashed out on the left wing at some point in that when he was starting 7 in a row, though.
Well, I think, and I've blotted most of last season out of my memory, but I think there was a period where both Pukki and Sargent were injured. In fact, it was that winning run shortly after Wagner came in where we won 3 at home in a row, where he was up front and had Hernandez, Nunez, and either sort of Marquinhos or Dal behind him. So he did get a bit of a run at that time, but other than that, he had a run of 5 under Dean Smith in the Premier League. And then other than that, 1s and 2s, basically.
Look at that classic Norwich fans us here just writing off Adam Ida.
He's basically played a whole season before.
What were you going to say, Dan?
I was going to say about Sargent, if you could essentially grow Wagner striker in a pod in Soccerbot 360, then it is Josh Sargent. Just incredible pressing, runs and runs and runs, physical, a good finisher, really stretches the defence, and also can drop into midfield and add an extra body there, which Wagner likes. So inevitably, he's a big miss because he is your prototype Wagner striker. And I think maybe one of the other ways we will miss him is maybe Barnes's limitations are slightly more exposed when he doesn't play. I think Barnes has been excellent, far better than I actually thought he would be for us. I think he's shown a lot of leadership, shown some good touches when he's got a bit of space, and obviously shown some really great elbows and ability to wind up referees or opponents rather, which we missed last season, and we needed that now. But I think without Sargent to stretch the play, Barnes is finding himself in slightly more congested areas, and the one thing he maybe doesn't have is a really good sort of silky touch of your classic number 10s who might play there. And I think that maybe against teams that do play really, really high, like Rotherham did, that might get exposed a little bit more. And we've not got a lot of options off the bench to fill that sort of role. And it is Barnes that's staying on as the 2 strikers rather than Ida staying on. Especially with Nunez out, we don't really have anyone to step into that role. So I think maybe a tiny little limitation in Barnes's ability has been exposed there. And especially a real shame because Barnes and Sargent were really kicking it off, really had started really well together. But as Zoe said, I think I thought when Ida came on against Huddersfield, after a few sort of nervy moments, really got into the game and played really, really well second half. And he was a bit of a scapegoat against Rotherham, I thought, Ida. He hasn't got the ability that Sargent has yet. He hasn't played as much as Sargent. He hasn't played, in a top league like Sargent did in the Bundesliga for as long as he has. So his development is way, way behind Sargent's. But I still think a run of games as your number sort of 3 striker, Ida's a very good option at championship level. But I'm pleased that he's going to be pushed by Hwang as well.
Yeah, I'm assuming the only type of footballer that the Soccerbot 360 would be able to grow in a pod is one that just passes all the time and can't really do anything else. But maybe that's the plan with the Soccerbot 720, which is something I've just made up before anyone suggests that the club are advancing on what we've currently got. Obviously we're keeping this down to a tight hour and a half, so I don't want to kind of keep going on and on. But if we're going to talk about on the pitch, we probably ought to. Well, we're 20 minutes in and we haven't talked about Jonathan Rowe yet. He became the first Norwich City player. I'm going to forget my own stat here because I haven't checked beforehand, to score in his first 5 starts for, I think, since 1928. So that's 95 years. Although that may be wrong, but it's pretty good either way. And he's just kind of been electric. I mean, the goal that we scored on Saturday, a very underrated part of that was just the fact that Rowe absolutely threw himself at that cross to make it happen. He's come out of nowhere, hasn't he, Zoe, and just really is already such an integral part of this team.
It's an absolute revelation, and it's been really lovely to watch. I think you see, even at the games that you're not at, you see, you're trying to follow it on Twitter or wherever, and you see things like, opposition player X is booked for a foul on Rowe, and in the games that I've seen in person, it's just the only way that people are stopping him is by hauling him down. Basically, he is absolutely flying, and it's just, I said it before about the sort of enjoying themselves aspect of it. He seems like such a happy young man that it's just a joy to watch. When he scored against Huddersfield and I was in the away end, and people had been singing his name almost constantly throughout the game, I don't know, there was something about it that just made me quite emotional. It's like, oh God, I'm going to cry at someone scoring in the third game of the season or something. But there's such an appetite in the world at the moment to resist having just letting yourself enjoy something for all manner of reasons, and it's just so nice to see somebody just clearly having the time of his life, and it properly really rubs off on everyone that's watching it as well. You want him to get the ball, you want him to just go for it, and I think the more encouragement he gets, the more he's going to do what he did on Saturday and just throw himself towards the ball, because he wants to be involved, he wants to be the one scoring. So yeah, it's just really, really lovely, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, I would say, echo absolutely all of that. I think the only issue that we have with Rowe is that I think he almost tries so hard, and presumably has been asked to kind of run himself into the ground in the first half, but you kind of get the best out of him for an hour, and then really hasn't kind of got anything to give. And so I think on Saturday we saw, I can't remember if it was Hernandez or Springett who came on for him. But I think because he has become so key for us in that role, performances are just starting to drop off on around that hour mark. Not across the board, but just every so often. So that's something to look at, but it's a minor quibble, Dan.
I guess he was out for so long with that injury, it's going to take him a little bit longer to get up to speed, isn't it? And this is where, I was going to say the return, but Sains coming into contention hopefully will be a massive benefit to that squad as well, because it's as brilliantly as Rowe has done, and we want it to continue. At players that age, usually there's unless you're James Maddison or Emi Buendia, there's usually a bit of a drop-off at some point. So now that we have that strength in depth, which we to come with Sains, and a little bit more strength in depth than, say, Hernandez or Springett coming on. Well, I say that having not seen a second of Sains playing football, but with the reputation he's come with, then hopefully that strength in depth will give Rowe a bit of respite as well, I think, because although he seems to take the pressure on his shoulders very, very comfortably and far more effectively than someone else who's come through the academy and has played on the left for Norwich over the last 5 years, and inevitably that pressure is going to get to a kid. So it's good that we'll have someone like Sains coming in to take that bit of that pressure off. But he has been excellent. When his name was on the team sheet ahead of the first game of the season, I made a very disappointed sound, because all I'd seen of him, I didn't think he'd make it at championship level, but he has been absolutely transformed this season. He makes brilliant decisions, which is the key. I think he's not just beating people all the time. He's just making really, really good decisions, sometimes playing the really simple pass, sometimes taking his man on, getting into the box as well. He looks like an entirely different player to the one that sort of came through a couple of years ago.
And I feel like there was an immediate bond with Rowe and Wagner, as we all saw on the video where Wagner was getting taken around the training ground, and he greeted Rowe very enthusiastically. And I feel like
Am I remembering this right? A tweak of the nipples, right?
Tweak of the nipples, yeah, which
Sure.
is a great way to meet someone for the first time. I feel like that shows an
Not
innate level
always.
of confidence that not many people have. But in that moment, I feel
That's
like...
not why Michael Bailey isn't here, though.
Well, I mean, we genuinely don't know, so but we suspect it's not. Perhaps that's what separates us from being football managers, is not having that confidence to go up to people and do that when we greet them for the first time.
And really get a measure of a man by immediately grabbing his nipples. Yeah, absolutely.
Unless I've forgotten about this, Rowe started on the right in the first 2 games of the season, didn't he? And then got moved across to the left. So he's shown he's also equally adaptable, and obviously he played really, really well against Hull in his first game, coming in from the right. And I guess against, I didn't see the Southampton game, but by all reports, played very well there. So it's shown that if we've got issues on the right, although Fasnak's been excellent and is really, really growing into the Championship as well, been slightly overlooked or undervalued maybe because how good Sarr and Rowe have been. But if we need to mix up on the right as well, then Rowe's available to pop across to that wing.
And is right-footed, but of his 5 goals, 2 have been with his head and 2 have been with his left foot. So he's sort of done it all, hasn't he, so far this season? And yeah, as you say, it may not last forever, but let's hope it does, and let's hope he's not posting about dangerous dogs on social media in the next few months. That will have all gone horribly wrong. I think, obviously we can talk about what's happened on the pitch, but we've all got lives to lead, including people watching along tonight. So let's move on to things we're not going to talk about. There's enough things that we're actually not going to talk about, that calling this the things we're not going to talk about makes it even more confusing than it usually is. But we haven't been on since the end of the transfer window, which ended up with us, roughly £20 million in profit, and with probably a stronger looking side than the one we ended last season with. I can take the probably away. I would say that almost seems not in doubt. So have we won the transfer window, as they say these days?
I feel like maybe we've won it in inches. How much do you think our squad has grown by, like in a total number of inches of person, from pre-transfer window to now? Because finally, for what feels like, I've been watching Norwich for over 30 years. It kind of feels like we are not the sort of more diminutive side that lines up at the start of each game anymore. We've suddenly got some, big units sort of throughout the team. And I hope it feels like that was very deliberate. And, it doesn't, you don't have to be massive to compete physically, but it really has given us an edge that we just haven't had for almost forever. And it's quite fun to see, like, someone as enormous as Shane Duffy, like, towering over Gibson, who always felt like one of our bigger players. Yeah, it's quite fun.
Are you saying if we stood the 2 squads on their head, on each other's head, had a tower, that how many inches difference would there be?
I reckon there'd be a whole Josh Sargent difference.
Wow, that's including the hair. That's a lot. And the other thing, and Zoe's absolutely right about the size, and I think Wagner's kind of alluded to that in a couple of his press conferences, where he's sort of said, like, he wants us to be tough to play against. And even the Farker sides that used to roll teams over, you wouldn't necessarily say they were tough to play against in a sense, but you didn't worry about facing them from a physical perspective. So there's that for starters. And the other thing is, and I had to double check this again, I can't 100% verify this stuff, but I think this is right. We've not signed an outfield player before this window over the age of 30 since 2014. So that's 9 years, and this window, I think we signed 5. So it's almost like a complete change in tack from the sort of Leonardo DiCaprio styles, no one over 25 we want, and to this kind of, we want the experience, we want the people who have been there and done it, and we want leaders on the pitch. So it's almost flipped, doesn't it, Dan? That's the way it feels.
Yeah, it feels a lot more Lambert, doesn't it?
Yes.
We've all had the conversation with ourselves, or if you're lucky enough to have some friends, then with friends as well,
Nope.
about Farke's team versus Lambert's team that were promoted, even against Worthington's team that were promoted, and it always came down to me. I think that Lambert's team would probably have just kicked off against Farke's team, and the fact they stayed in the Premier League and finished mid-table suggests that would probably have happened as well. And it feels like this squad currently, we're still pretty early in the season, are closer in identity to Lambert, more streetwise, harder, much taller, and less sort of I don't know, less sort of worried about maybe how people perceive them. I think just really no nonsense footballers. Which and I would say I preferred watching the way that Farke played, but I also absolutely love getting behind a team, with a Grant Holt in or with an Ashley Barnes in as well. There's something to be said for that, especially because it winds up opposition fans a lot as well. But also, as well as being more streetwise, it's still got some really, really good, talented footballers in that squad as well. So it's got a bit of streetwise, both sort of with the ball at their feet and off the ball as well.
Yeah, and Alan Grapes has said as much in the comments that the squad seems more streetwise now. In terms of favourite signings from the window, I mean, Matt Gregory has said, is Jack Stacey better in David Wagner's system than Max Aarons? I think there's possibly an argument to say that yes, he is. Is Stacey someone that's caught your eye, Zoe, or any preferred? I mean, there's quite a few to choose from, right? There's quite a few players who have immediately come in and made a positive difference.
Yeah, which is sort of a nice change from immediately sort of taking a dislike to all of the players that we've signed. Well, they're no better than the ones we've got. Stacey has fitted in really well, considering he's replaced someone that has, played in that position for us for a great number of years. I think, Max Aarons left us with a lot of good wishes. But Stacey has sort of come in. He is not Max, which I think kind of helps in a way that, he plays very differently. He's a different stature as well, and it's interesting that he spoke about how he's been working on positioning in the penalty area, and it helped him be in the right position on Saturday to pop up with a goal. I've mentioned him before, but I think Duffy is a great addition to the team. He's someone that seems to really value defending well, which is, again, not something that we've really cared much about over the last few years. But, you see him reacting when something's gone well, really sort of, I like it when defenders celebrate good defending, but also when they've done something badly, and he, you can see the frustration in him. He's desperate for us not to be conceding a goal. He's desperate for us to do well. And I think at the other end of the pitch, Barnes, for all of his sort of annoying everybody else, I think another thing that he does really well is that he holds our team to account, and he will have a go at Rowe when he thinks Rowe could have made a better decision, or he will give anyone, he'll bend the ear of anyone, which I think is a bit like Holty in that way. Would just he'll talk to anyone and he'll shout at anyone and all of those things. I think that kind of communication at both ends of the pitch, with Duffy and Barnes, as sort of leadership figures in the team, I feel like it was something we were crying out for last season, and it really does feel like we have got those leaders now, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, and I tweeted this, but I think we've got players who've been promoted in our squad from the Championship in our squad from 9 of the last 10 seasons, and the season we're missing is the year we went up under Alec Neil. So if we're allowed to have Neil Adams in that, then it's 10 out of 10. I mean, the other thing that we had was a really fun deadline day. I mean, I'm definitely missing some names out of this, but Casey Palmer, Jamal Lowe, Kiefer Moore, and ultimately Wee Joe Huang. I'm definitely missing some strikers.
Tommy Cannon. Tommy Cannon.
Tommy Cannon, of course.
Yeah.
Tommy Cannon. And
Leicester City's Tommy Cannon.
Leicester City. Oh, yeah, he could be here on Wednesday. Jeez.
He is not available, apparently.
It could have been you.
Running
misfired. Yeah, so the £7 million that apparently we were just about to pull out of the back of a sofa somewhere. But obviously, I guess Wee Jo Hwang obviously ultimately joined, but going the other way, plus quite a sizable amount of money was Andy Omobamidele. I again have not done the research on this, but I think it was £11 million rising to a possible 20. Which I'm saying in a high-pitched voice because that seems like a lot, Dan.
Yeah, I guess. Well, if we believe what we were told by Stuart Webber, then we turned down a bid for 20 million in January from Omobamidele. So I assume it would have been a similar kind of 11 rising to 20 million. But for a guy who was our fourth choice centre back, I'd say that's very good business. When he first broke through, he looked class. Omobamidele did, and I think probably will turn into a really class centre back. But when he picked up his injury, he wasn't quite the same player since then. I think maybe if he'd been left-footed, we would have seen him play a lot more under Wagner. But he couldn't break ahead of Hanley and then Duffy since he came in. So I think it's really good business. I don't know if Forrest are playing at the moment, but I don't think he's involved for them at the moment. And I hope he goes on to do really well. He seemed really sort of fans liked him. He seemed to like being here. He was very grateful to the opportunity that the club gave him. So just seemed like a top lad. So I hope he goes and does really well. In terms of signings as well, I thought, Stacey, I think probably does suit our system a little bit better. I really like Max, and if anyone saw him play against Chelsea on yesterday, he was outstanding, really, really good. Kyle Walker got loads of plaudits for England for stopping Mudryk against Ukraine, and Max did exactly the same thing for Bournemouth, and he's found a team that will play to Max's strengths. But I think Wagner's strengths for his fullbacks are bombing on, and then either booming crosses into the box or getting into the box themselves when players going down the other side, and Stacey fits that really, really well. And the other great signing is Dimitri Giannoulis, who people trying to tell me was here for the last couple of seasons.
It's a twin.
I can't believe it. This guy is levels above the other Giannoulis that we've been watching over the last couple of years. He's been one of our sort of top three performers so far, I'd say, this season.
And now seems to get taken off for tactical reasons rather than because he's a complete bomb scare. We can't trust him to play in the second 45.
He had a knock, I think, on Saturday, didn't he? Which is why he was taken off as well.
Yes.
Yeah, just because the Rotherham game very much felt like this is Giannoulis going off at half-time kind of game in the last couple of seasons. But Wagner's stuck with him, and rightly so.
Yep, and that feels like progress. Hopefully full 90s to come soon. We also lost Milot Rashica. Moment silence. That'll do. I mean, in terms of what else has happened, I think that's broadly covers the transfer. Obviously, we haven't talked about Danny Bart. We haven't really mentioned Adam Forshaw, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities when they're not warming the bench and they are playing games. I mean, I presume they will come in against Fulham. Go on, Dan.
Just one tiny thing about the age of the signings we've brought in and a sea change there. It would probably be a bit of a worry in terms of where we're going to be at 2-3 seasons down. But we've also been adding to the academy squad with sort of 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds coming through there. A few of them who, and we've heard this before, of course, so a pinch of salt, but a few of them we're sort of led to believe will be pushing for first team football this season. If not this season, then definitely next season. So they've sort of, to be fair to Webber, he seems to have done really well. He's brought in experience for this season while also taking care of potentially the next few years as well.
Yeah, and go on, Zoe.
I was just going to say a slightly longer moments reflection for Tim Krul as well, who we've not said goodbye to, and has been an integral part of a lot of the good things that have happened over the last few years. So while it's probably the right thing for him and for the club to free up a bit of money in terms of wages, it's thank you to everything that Tim Krul has done.
Here. What a journey he's had.
Poor bloke, getting relegated again. in 6 months, 7 months' time.
Yeah, he sure does pick his clubs, doesn't he? Oh my goodness. I mean, the other things that we should quickly mention that happened over the international break. Dan, you've already alluded to it, but we have currently the best player in the championship, and again, I'm sure Gabriel Sara will be given plenty of airtime by us when we are on this season. But well done to Gabby. I think that's a victory for the stats nerds, because the number of posts I saw, and maybe it's just the people who I follow that were saying Gabriel Sara is this data nerd site's player of the season so far, just over and over again. So I think that was a win for those people and people who are counting things like key passes. But richly deserved.
Don't pretend you're not one of those, Steve.
Yeah. No. I'm saying it's a victory for us. I'm very much part of that. So yeah, if it sounded like a scathing tone, it certainly wasn't. I'm very much team stat nerd. And of course, alongside him, another man revitalized seemingly, Kenny McLean, who for a brief and very scary moment, depending on your thoughts on Kenny, looked like he might be rejoining Daniel Farker at Leeds, but he's here until 2026 with the option of a further year. I mean, by then he'll be either kind of Russell Martin style, you stayed a bit too long, or firmly cemented in Norwich City legend. Which way do we think the balance is going to tip?
Or Russell Martin style young manager already by that stage.
Who, when Wagner leaves in 2026, he'll be joint caretaker with Narcis Palach, him and Kenny. But no, very, very pleased personally to see him here for another 3 years.
He's part of the furniture, isn't he? You gotta love Kenny.
Absolutely, and captain now as well, of course. So,
Captain Kenny
can do it all. Have I missed anything that we're not going to talk about?
Just a moment for Onel having a classic Onel kind of injury. Like who misses games from having a big hand? Like I never quite understood what was wrong with him. His hand is big, so he will be out for this week. Yeah, vintage Onel.
It looked like he'd endured one of Ashley Barnes's handshakes, didn't it? The size of that. Just crushed in his paw.
I mean, imagine how difficult it'd be to hold one of those little Argos pens when you've got a massive bloated hand. I'm sure it's caused him. I hope it wasn't his writing hand, otherwise it caused him no end of angst.
His journaling would have taken a real hit.
Yeah. Thankfully, his journaling is mostly just trolling Ipswich on Instagram and TikTok. But we'll gloss over that. We've got a few more months until we have to worry about them, I think. Okay. Well, if we've talked about all we're not going to talk about, then let's start looking ahead.
This is almost fantasy football.
And looking ahead means looking at a couple of games. I think we're into that heavy fixture period that comes straight after the international break. We've got a much missed hop, skip and a jump over to Plymouth away on Saturday. I was looking at our away fixtures, actually. I think 4 of the next 5 is something like Plymouth, Swansea, Sunderland and Cardiff. So thoughts and prayers with those who travel to all the away games. There's going to be some long trips. But before that, we've got a really exciting looking clash with Leicester at Carry Road on Wednesday. I don't know, did either of you catch the game against Southampton on Friday night? I saw the second half of that, by which time Leicester had already scored 3 and looked just like they could add as many as they wanted to that. So I don't know, what do we think is the best way of getting a result out of this one? Because it's going to be tricky.
Can I kick off? I meant to ask this at the start.
Go on.
Which mid-2010s Norwich City player as Leicester manager Enzo Maresca briefly played with? And you can leave that hanging, have a think about it. Open it. Do you know? Of course you know, Steve.
No. I don't know. I have a thought.
Right.
But I'm happy to leave that for the comments for now.
Should we leave it hanging for a bit?
Let's leave it hanging. We'll revisit.
But Leicester.
Yes.
Leicester.
But Leicester. Yes, for Leicester.
Well, interestingly, that it seems like they hadn't really got into first gear up until the performance against Southampton. I mean, they'd lost their previous game at home to Hull. And had won. I think they'd won every game before that by 1 goal when they were winning. So they hadn't quite clicked yet, potentially, but still were performing really well. And now it feels like maybe They have clicked, although, who hasn't put 4 goals past Southampton this season so far? But where I think the biggest test for us so far this season, inevitably, and especially in midfield and for our fullbacks as well. And we've already talked about Sarah being the highest rated player in the Championship so far by nerd sites like Who Scored. Well, Leicester City, you've got the 3rd highest in Dewsbury Hall in midfield as well. And by the way, 2nd highest is Josh Sargent, which is another reason why we will miss him. So Dewsbury Hall and Dee, Harry Winks, for goodness sake, they're Premier League footballers in midfield. But then so is Gabriel Sara. And whereas I'm not entirely sold on Kenny McLean being a Premier League footballer, he has a lot of experience at that level. So I think it will really come down to the battle of the midfields. And that will probably mean us having to sort of flood that midfield like we do with our 2 strikers dropping in or our wingers dropping in where necessary to box it. And I think Stacey will probably have the toughest sort of outing so far when he's up against the lads, Steffi Mavadidi,
who we were also linked with in the summer, I believe.
Who tore Southampton apart by all accounts. So yeah, tough, but I think sort of Carrow Road under lights on a weekday night against one of the sort of big teams in the Championship feels like something that this group of players at Norwich City will be really up for.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely can't wait. And it feels like a long time since we've had one of those games at Championship level. I mean, we may have had 1 or 2 at the back end of last season, but I'm not counting those, where we felt like proper underdogs. And I mean, yeah, Southampton seem to do a lot of their defending like on the edge of the opposition's 18-yard box. So I'm not necessarily saying that they're the best kind of gauge for how we're going to do. But I don't know. Do you think, Zoe, that we should mix things up a little bit? Wagner spoke about needing to rotate his team during this period. Do you think we will see that, or do you think he'll stick with the tried and trusted 4-4-2 again, seeing as it's working?
Yeah, I think for this game, surely what we know works has got to be the way to go. It'll be really interesting. Like, it is our first proper, real test, I think, this season to see how far we have come. Felt like, I've probably mentioned this earlier, but like, it felt like every time we had what felt like, a big game or a must-win game last season, we didn't turn up. Like, barring potentially that Millwall game, which again maybe came a bit more as a surprise rather than a must-win game. But we were immediately not very good the next game, and I think creating those kind of big games and responding to that kind of pressure is what you need to put a very good run in the Championship together. And if we can pull off a performance against Leicester, I feel like you're not going to get many trickier games at home anyway throughout the season. So it kind of becomes a blueprint for the rest of the season. And I think really trying to work out like what are the things we do really well. Let's do those, and not not just respond to who Leicester are and let Leicester dictate terms as well. I think we've got to try and be in charge of the situation. We want people not to want to come to Carrow Road, and if people see that Leicester have struggled, then it's not going to make it feel very easy for the other teams that are coming. So it's a really big game, and I feel like it's coming at like a quite a crucial point in the season, because we start to go from decent start to like, this is what it's going to look like for the rest of the season. So it's going to be really fascinating to watch it pan out on Wednesday.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, weirdly for us, like the seasons where we've started well, we've not really been able to maintain that, which is, whenever I do post a stat about this is the best season since this year, it's kind of like, oh yeah, but we've finished 11th that year. So hopefully this will not be one of those times. David Wagner definitely likes Leicester. I think he said something like they will be promoted. And he also said he doesn't think you can bet on Leicester to be promoted anymore.
Hopefully he's not tried.
Yeah, well, if you're listening, David, we're not advocating that you should put a bet on them, but it seems unlikely that the bookies would have stopped taking odds after 6 games of the season. But maybe they are just that good. We'll
especially with them, not being top of the table at the moment as well.
Yeah, that's also true. Oh, that's going to happen. I mean, it was Leicester who stung the bookies with that 5,000 to 1 Premier League win. So maybe they're just not going to take any chances on them from now on. Can we have some score predictions? Do we, or at least some result predictions? Are we going to get anything out of this against a team who are definitely going up? I mean, it would feel great. I mean, the atmosphere is going to be great on Wednesday. A quick word for the drum as well, which I think has helped. Yeah. So is that going to make any difference? It's a leading question.
Leicester City are going to run away with the title, I think, and so I'm not entirely sure that the result and performance even dictates how we should sort of feel about the rest of the season. But equally, they've Southamptoned it at the back a few times this season already. They're not infallible. I think both teams have created the most chances in the Championship. We've both given up some silly goals, although obviously compared to last season, we've given up far fewer silly goals than we were. So it feels like it should be a high-scoring game. So I'm going for a 0-0. Seems absolutely inevitable now that it's going to finish 0-0.
Yeah, it's impeccable logic. I can't fault it. Zoe, what do you think?
As you know, I'm always very optimistic. So I'm going to be a bit more restrained this time and say 3-0 to Norwich.
Wow, that is restrained.
It is.
Okay, well,
It's
please
quite
try and
tough
bring
for
more
me
optimism
to.
next time.
Tough for me to say that because it's not. It goes against my natural instincts of thinking we'll score at least 4 goals. But maybe 3-1 even, just to be really negative about it.
Yeah, they'll get a consolation or something.
What are you going for, Steve?
I suppose just to round it off, as we've got a win and a draw, so we're going to lose. Feels like a good way to end things.
On the Ball podcast, always covering all bases.
I'm just saying what Mike would have done if he'd hosted. He'd have immediately been in there. Well, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
Excellent Michael Bailey impression there. That was good.
Yes, I would have done a lot more fence sitting, of course. Well, I mean, we have only, I believe, conceded 3 in the last 6 games. So we have sort of tightened things. And one of those was against Jordan Hugill. So, yeah, maybe... without a big target man, Leicester have got nothing. But I will say 2-1 to Leicester, just on the basis that I think you're right, Dan. We can't. It'll be an interesting test, but I think they are going to be strong, and we'll give them a good game at the very least. So I think with predictions now, I mean, Plymouth feels like a while off, and we can talk about that when it gets here, right? But we can probably move on to the looking much more kind of solid and reassured. Kenny Other Business, 3 more years in the bank. We've got a couple of questions in. Jeffman98 has said, disappointed that Wagner didn't sing along when meeting Amber T after the game. Amber T being the singer songwriter with the guitar who's been singing the Johnny Rowe chant, right? Trying to pretend like I'm down with this at the moment. But speaking of which, each of yours favourite Norwich City chants, Jeff Mann asks. I mean, the new Johnny Rowe one is good, isn't it?
It's absolute belter, isn't it? It's very hard to get it out of your head once it's in
obsessive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, I don't, and I feel like most of our chants currently are stolen, as most chants are now, from other. But I've not heard that one elsewhere by any other team. I'm happy to be corrected there, but yeah, that one's good. It was very good fun at Huddersfield. That was.
It really was. It feels like a Barclay/Snake Pit original, as in to using the tune. And a lot of them aren't great, but that one is a belter. So hopefully we'll continue to hear it. And Matt Gregory, doesn't ask, just states that the most improved player this season, apart from Dimmy, is Poeta. And I mean, we can't go through the whole squad, right? But I think he deserves a mention. We're still in the cup because of his goal, and he's a left back. Who knew? I could say the same about Dimmy, but Poeta also a left back. Who knew?
Who's next for left back then? Like Liam Gibbs, can he get in there? He's not getting in the team.
I mean, I don't want to be controversial, but maybe Sam McCallum. I don't know if have we seen anything to suggest he might be.
Is there a role for George Long there? Because Millwall fans do not seem to think he's a goalkeeper.
Yeah, well, as Zoe says, maybe George Long is purely there just for the big 23-24 totem pole. He's the one who's an extra Josh Sargent, and his name is Long as well. Yeah, well, hopefully we do see more of Poeta. I love the fact that 1-0 up with half an hour to go, we'll just stick Pochetta on at left back. That'll shore things up.
When he can sort of, you can see the sort of cogs whirring when he gets the ball, like almost like he's sort of coming back to life as a footballer, like just kind of trying to remember what it is. Somewhere along the line, he must have been a pretty good footballer to get where he is. He's an international player, and he's not had any luck in the last few years for whatever reason. And you can just sort of, like, he gets the ball, he's got acres of space to run into. It's almost like you can see him thinking, oh yeah, this feels okay. Like I think I remember what to do here. Like I remember when to pass, I remember when to run. So yeah, hopefully that continues.
I enjoyed he came on against Huddersfield at left wing and set up Ida's goal with a nice little assist. And Wagner obviously thought, well, that's too much fun you're having now. So immediately demoted him back to left back instead, where he did a very nice job.
I think it's losing the man bun. That's what's really helped the new blonde locks. Michael's taken a bit of stick on this podcast. So if you haven't thrown your mobile out the window yet, Michael, then I'm going to give you due credit here, because I'm pretty sure every time that we've kind of sniggered at Pochetta, Michael has always said there's a player in there somewhere. We'll obviously revisit that take when things start going wrong again. But I think fair play, he has shown over the last few weeks. So good for him, and good for Michael too. Any Kenny, other business from either of the two of you?
No, I don't think so. Anyone looking forward to seeing Barley Mumba next Saturday?
Who has gone the other way and now doesn't seem to be a fullback at all and is playing far further up the pitch. So, yeah.
I mean, it feels. I think it says a lot about the way we've started this season. It feels a long time ago that I was sort of feeling that incredible righteous outrage that we'd got rid of Mumba, and maybe it was the right decision all along. Early days, but
he is definitely scoring though.
Oh yeah, that will absolutely happen. Yeah,
running the full length of the pitch, cupping his ear to.
Yes, and he's done a reverse Pochetta in that he's gone from fullback to winger. So obviously we've got that covered now with Johnny Rowe. So yeah, do your worst, Barley. Don't sure. Yeah, he's definitely scoring now. Yes, well, and we will revisit that, of course, when we're next on the inevitable Barley Mumba screamer from 30 yards. But I think that's probably all for today's On the Ball as we tick towards possibly a tight hour. The Norwich City podcast that always lets Michael Bailey play the role of main man during our podcast roast dinners. Make sure you subscribe to On the Ball if you haven't already. It's free on your usual player. Just search Michael Bailey Norwich City on your preferred social platform, and ratings and reviews wherever prompted are always hugely appreciated, especially the good ones, but maybe the bad ones as well. Yeah, we like some constructive criticism. And if you want to get in touch with any questions or topic proposals, send Michael a direct message on Twitter at michaeljbailey. He loves them. And if not there, if you're too frightened, then you can still send us your suggestions for topics to discuss by emailing Twitterkers, twitterkers@icloud.com. A huge thank you to our guests tonight. It's been great to be back. Zoe, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a blast.
It really has. I think so too. Oh God, it's getting a bit sickly now. But Dan, thank you as well.
Thank you too, Steve, and top presenting duties.
Thank you.
A sublime supply teacher performance.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean,
you'll be getting the gig full time in no time whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you say that, I'm pretty sure you'll have stuck some chewing gum under the desk or something, or there'll be some kind of booby trap when I sit down on my chair. I don't know. Anyway, we're not normally quite as nice to this to each other as this when we're not on the air, but it's nice to be nice, as we've already said. Anyway, thank you very much if you've joined us live tonight, or if you're listening back, we very much appreciate it. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but until then, never mind he says as he gets the music ready, danger. Bye.